conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
What is happening, y'all? Welcome to the Mission Ready Men briefing right here on the SHR Media Network, where masculinity is still in fashion and faith has not been neutered. Today is Thursday, March 12th, in the year of our Lord 2026. And this is not just politics, but it is spiritual warfare. And suicidal empathy has been dressed up as progress. So we are done pretending, done pulling punches, and not going to apologize. So let us get right to it. You know, before we do that, do me a favor and go ahead and hit the like button. The algorithm has not been being friendly to us right now. So hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and help us beat back these tech tyrants. Despite things that have been loosening up a bit, and they're paying lip service to it, telling us that they are loosening things up, the evidence still suggests that they are trying to throttle us and accounts like ours. So please smash the like button. Go ahead and follow us on all the socials, and tell the big tech tyrants to get bent. All right, before we dive in, it always happens this way. There's always something that happens after we finish preparing our shows. And I saw this morning, and for everyone who says that we're in a cult and President Trump, we just follow President Trump and believe everything he says and follow everything he says and don't question anything. He said something last night that was a mistake, in my opinion. He declared victory in Iran. And let me see if I have that for us. Like I said, I just came across it as I was doing my final prep for the show. And yeah, here we go. And so I just want to play this and talk about it in a minute before we get into everything else that we have scheduled for this episode. But let's take a look at this. Maybe. Here we go.
Well, it's only good if you win. You know, you can only do. And we've won. Let me tell you, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
Yeah, he's right. You never want to say that too early. And then he proceeds to say it too early. We all remember, or maybe not, but I remember what happened in 2003 after 40 some odd days of so-called shock and awe. George W. Bush said that the mission was accomplished. And we saw how that turned out. So I support the strikes in Iran. I support this war. I support the decision to prosecute this war. However, declaring victory this soon is a mistake. And don't get me wrong, I fully expect us to prevail decisively. I don't think that there's any chance that we won't win. But at the same time, like he said himself, you don't want to say that too early. So, and not to mention the fact that they do still have some capabilities. I mean, they're still laying mines in the Straits of Hormuz. They're still launching rockets and drones at a much slower pace, and they're not very effective. I understand that. But at the same time, they still do have those capabilities for now. So until all of that is completely wiped out, I would refrain from declaring victory. And publicly, anyway. I mean, I think you and I understand, and we have probably said privately, yeah, this thing is not going to last long. It's over, whatever. But he's the president, and in a forum like that, in a situation like that, probably not the best idea. But maybe that's just me. All right, let's get into the meat of the show. And we've been seeing warning signs across the country. Businesses are fleeing hostile states for more friendly ones. Governments are challenging officials that voters have actually elected. And policies keep collapsing under the weight of reality. And all these stories may look and may seem unrelated, but they all point to the same root problem. And institutions that demand power, while the legitimacy that they once supported, or that once supported that power, is cracking. It's cracking, and it is on the verge of collapse. And I want to take a look at, well, I talked about businesses fleeing blue states, fleeing states that are hostile to productivity. And when that happens, the businesses and those CEOs and the people who create that wealth, they leave. And wealthy Americans and these large corporations that leave these blue states, it's not just, well, this will happen if you do this. It's not just a theory anymore. It is happening. And it's happening in real time. And governments that they treat success like it's a crime. Honestly, when they treat success like it's a crime, those successful people leave. Washington State just passed a massive wealth tax targeting millionaires and billionaires. And Starbucks former CEO Howard Schultz, who is no right-winger by any stretch, they like to try and paint him that way because of some things he may have said that don't really comport with the left-wing agenda. But he's a leftist. And he is leaving Seattle and opening a corporate office in Nashville. Now, the headquarters aren't moving yet, but we've seen a lot of companies relocate to Nashville and other states, other cities and states as well. But these high net worth residents and businesses are relocating to tax-friendly states, tax-friendly locales, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Nevada. We've seen it. This was Washington State, but we've seen it in California. We've seen it in New York. To a lesser extent, places like Chicago and Massachusetts. But it's happening. And not, excuse me, not just the wealthy people, not just the CEOs, but the companies themselves. They're leaving California. Gavin Newsom is just getting pummeled, and I am so here for it because of the volatility in the oil prices. Gas has risen as a result of what's happening in the Middle East right now. And Gavin Newsom decided that he would blame that on what's happening in the Middle East. Let me rephrase that, because they have, the gas prices have risen as a result of that, but he's blaming what's happening in California and what has been happening in California over the past several years on that. And well, let's just see what the administration has to say about that, because I suspect that they have a different viewpoint.
You guys are responsible for the fact that his gas is over $7 a gallon. What do you say to him?
Well, wow, that is something coming from California, because, of course, under Gavin Newsom, California used to have 40 refineries. Now they have 8. 2 more are closing. They're going to be down to 6 with Chevron and Valero closing. California is the most energy-dependent state in America. 63% of their oil gets imported. Now they're going to be importing refined product into San Francisco Bay and into Long Beach every day just to keep their fleet. They have the largest number of internal combustion cars in America in California, and more than any other state even has vehicles. And of course, they've been trying to eliminate those and doing that, which then puts us dependent on China. Right. I mean, their energy policies are as crazy as Europe, and part of the reason why their prices are so high is they've restricted supply and killed their own economy.
And so you guys are.
So I didn't realize that they had 40 refineries at one point. And because of Newsom, they don't. Because of Newsom, they're down to 8 and about to be down to 6. He can't blame that on the past 2 weeks in the Middle East. He just can't. But of course, he's going to try. And there are people who will believe him. But it's not just oil refineries. Yamaha is relocating their corporate offices to, I believe, Florida. They're leaving California. The state where they're relocating to escapes me at the moment. But companies are citing ridiculous taxes, ridiculous regulations, and just flat out political hostility towards these corporations. Businesses are going to take the path of least resistance and go where they're allowed to operate and flourish. It's just that's just the economic reality of the situation. You also have a oil refinery in New Jersey that is leaving the state. I mean, despite all evidence to the contrary, these people really believe somehow that they can tax and regulate their states and this country into prosperity. It has absolutely never worked that way. And it really boggles the mind that they continue to go down these roads. Capital is the most mobile thing in our economy. I mean, money can go anywhere. People can move their money, their headquarters. They can relocate their homes. I mean, they can do anything. And politicians just assume, by virtue of their own magnificence or something, that wealth is just trapped and they can do whatever they want with it, despite it belonging to someone else. But they are mistaken. Citizens vote at the ballot box. Businesses vote with their feet. Businesses vote with moving trucks. Economic migration is one of the first warning signs of policy failure. One of the reasons that we left Texas, property taxes were unbelievably just ridiculous. And we saw, when we were looking for a place to land, there were states that had a fraction of the property taxes for comparable properties. It's and those states where that tax burden is so much less, those states are growing. Mississippi, Alabama, right here in Arkansas. Somebody in the chat said we're full in Arkansas. Yeah, we are. So don't come. No, but I mean, seriously, these states are collapsing, and they're going to have no choice but to either come around or they're just going to tax everybody into oblivion and collapse. They treat wealth, they treat success like it's something to punish. Like I said earlier, they treat it like a crime. They always say, pay your fair share. Bernie Sanders, famous, even though he's a millionaire now with 3 homes. Pay your fair share. The great Thomas Sowell once said, what is your fair share of what someone else worked for? Has anyone ever answered that question? They build their policies on resentment and jealousy rather than growth and what's good for the state or the country. And when leadership is hostile to business, hostile to success, that trust evaporates. The trust that they are going to do what is best for the state, best for the country, the trust that they have the citizens' best interest, the country's best interest at heart, evaporates. gone. You can tax success, but you can't force it to stay. And if you tax it enough, you'll force it to leave. Economic flight is one of perhaps the first crack in the system, but it doesn't stop with taxes. We're seeing governments challenge we're seeing them challenge the authority of officials that the voters actually elected. And I saw this first on BZ's show the other day, and at first I couldn't believe it, and then I was like, of course I can believe it. And I'm talking about the Washington State sheriff's decertification law. They passed a bill, and it just passed the Senate, I believe, yesterday or the day before. So it's going to the governor's desk. They passed a bill to allow the state, and not even elected officials in the state, an unelected bureaucracy, to be able to decertify sheriffs. The Criminal Justice Training Commission in Washington State can decertify sheriffs. And if the certification goes away, that sheriff immediately loses his office. And this state board can just, whoever they decide they don't like, they can decertify. Now, there are certain procedures, I guess, but come on. You and I both know that if they want somebody gone, they will figure out a way, now that they have the law behind them, to get that person gone. They created a system where this state board can revoke the certification. And the target of these decertifications, there are a number of sheriffs in Washington State and across the country. And if this succeeds, you can pretty much rest assured that it will be used as a model in other jurisdictions across the country. But sheriffs who openly oppose state policies like state gun laws, criminal justice reforms, sheriffs who openly opposed COVID mandates and all that nonsense. There's a sheriff in Washington State that they think is one of the main targets of this, Pierce County's Keith Swank, who has been openly critical of Washington's gun laws and their criminal justice reforms and other progressive policies from the Capitol. And if you don't toe the line, you run the risk of having this state board decertify you. And the sheriff is not just another government employee. As we mentioned, the sheriffs are elected. The sheriff post predates the United States. They have historically been elected by the county, and Washington State has already, and this is likely a move in this direction across the state, but they have already made it so that sheriffs in I believe it's King County is now an appointed position. They're not elected in King County anymore. And so if they decertify you, they get to appoint the successor. And so this is likely a precursor to doing that statewide. But as it stands right now, sheriffs are, like I said, elected by the county, which means the sheriff answers to the voters. They don't like that. They don't like that at all. But this design kept law enforcement close to the people. Now, we have what they're doing in Washington State. So keep that in mind. And let's pivot to my state, Arkansas, because a sheriff's race here in Arkansas, it tells a very different story. There is a sheriff candidate who just won the Republican nomination. A couple of years ago, he shot and killed the man who kidnapped his daughter, his 14-year-old daughter. He woke up, realized his daughter was not in the house, went looking for her, found her in the company of this predator, chased him down, ran him off the road. And when the guy tried to attack him, he shot him, killed him. And now he's running for sheriff, and he won the nomination over the guy who arrested him in the first place. So, and according to reports, he's actually leading the race. Now, there are other counties, other states, where the fact that he's awaiting trial for murder would immediately disqualify him. The fact that he's actually on trial for murder, for killing the man the predator, who I believe I think he had 42 arrests. Let's take a look at this. And I know you probably can't read it, but I'm gonna read it. This guy had 43 felony counts against him, and a judge released him on a $5,000 bond after he was caught in the act of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old. Sexually assaulting this guy's daughter. Now, he is awaiting trial for murder over rescuing his daughter. This is a mission-ready guy right here. This is a mission-ready man. He took his mission very seriously, and he protected his daughter. But 43 felony counts, including child pornography. And who knows what would have happened if he had not been there. Now, B says she thinks the charges were dropped. This was as of a couple of weeks ago when he won that nomination. So they could very well have been. I haven't seen anything to that effect yet. he should never have been charged in the first place. Let's just get that out there right now. And there are a number of places where that he would not have been charged with anything. Which makes me wonder about this sheriff, because there were reports that this guy who was let off with such a low bond actually had relationships with the police. So there's that. But anyway, what this tells us is that whatever the outsiders may think, whether you are supportive of Aaron Spencer or against him, that's irrelevant, because the decision is up to the voters. And the fact that he's leading the polls here in Arkansas doesn't surprise me one bit. Not a bit. Because this community values those actions. This community values protecting your family. This community does not value the rights of predators, unlike places like New York and the governor of Virginia. I can't attribute that to the citizens of Virginia, most of them anyway. But Arkansas voters are deciding directly who they can trust, and they believe they can trust Aaron Spencer. Whereas in Washington, they want to put their trust in the government. Getting back to the point here, when bureaucratic entities can gain the power of removal over duly elected officials, what does duly elected even really mean at that point? The badge no longer represents the people. It no longer answers to the people. It belongs to the system that is supervising it. And we all know where that leads. Here in Arkansas, the voters may very well and likely will elect the man who shot his daughter's kidnapper. In Washington, the state is going to fire the sheriffs that the voters duly elected. The sheriff was designed to be the people's lawman, not the state's employee. The sheriff was not a bureaucratic appointment, at least in most counties. They're trying to change that. But the sheriff is supposed to be a direct representative of the community. And when that relationship, when that dynamic changes, the balance of authority changes with it. All right, y'all, let's get a word in from our sponsor for today's show. And the sponsor for today's show is Carry Girl Gear. So, fellas, stop guessing on gifts. CarryGirl.com has bold, high-quality shirts with great designs that your wife or your girlfriend will love. Also accessories, t-shirts, drinkware, hats. It's all there. So if you want zero stress, grab yourself a gift card and let her pick. Simple, smart, and you'll be a hero. Carrygirl.com. Go ahead and check it out. Visit carrygirl.com today. All right, y'all. I am Biggie, and you are watching or listening to the Mission Ready Men briefing right here on the SHR Media Network, where you can catch our great lineup. Sackhead Sean with the Edge of Liberty every Monday and Wednesday at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. Jersey Joe with the Reverb Common Sense every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. BZ in the Berserk Bobcat Saloon every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. That means he will be on tonight, so be sure to check that out. And the new guy, Lyle Armstrong, Beer and Bullstein, every Friday and Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Those are all great shows. I urge you to check them all out. You will get great insights and perspectives from a whole range of personalities. And you really need to check out Beer and Bullstein with Lyle, because he is a 20-plus year combat veteran, EOD, and he has a great insight, and he does a lot with constitutional issues and explaining the Constitution and our founding document. So you need to check all of those out, especially my show. No, but check them all out. You will not be disappointed. Please be sure to like and subscribe and share all of the great shows that we have. We, like I said at the beginning, we're dealing with a bit of an algorithm issue right now. So please be sure and do us a favor and like and subscribe and share everything, because we're in the middle of a bit of a breakthrough, but we want more, because we want to reach as many people as we possibly can. All right, now back to the briefing. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Gun control narratives persist even when real world evidence, empirical evidence, contradicts those narratives. We talked about governments, state governments, local governments challenging elected officials, using their authority to try and override voters. But there's another place where authority is losing credibility. The policies continue to fail, but the narrative is persistent. The narrative just does not go away. And that's due largely in part to the American Pravda carrying water for the left. In Connecticut, the police arrested an 18-year-old in possession of a firearm, in possession of what they term ghost guns, a ghost gun. At 18 years old in Connecticut, he is legally barred from owning a pistol, but he got one anyway. Connecticut is one of the most heavily regulated states in the country. It's right up there with Illinois, it's right up there with California, it's right up there with Massachusetts, and a host of others, soon to be Virginia. The gun laws in Connecticut are ridiculous. You need a permit in order to buy a firearm. Handguns and long guns. You need to take firearm safety training before you can get the permit. Background checks, a permit to carry, and you have to be 21. Open carry is banned. So-called assault weapons are banned. AR-15s and similar platforms. There's a magazine capacity limit of 10 rounds. You need a permit in Connecticut to buy ammunition. Private gun sales are regulated and require authorization. Ghost guns are banned. Bump stocks are banned. Red flag laws are in full effect. And the state maintains a record of firearm sales through the transfer forms. And yet, despite all of that regulation, criminals still somehow manage to get weapons. It's crazy. It's almost like the laws don't work. It's almost like they ignore the laws. But that can't be true. No. That can't possibly be the case, can it? Let's just be real. Laws affect the law abiding. Criminals couldn't care less about your stupid gun laws. Could not care less. And why we keep pretending, not we, but why the people who write these laws keep pretending that more laws are there are, between state, local, and federal jurisdictions, there are over 30,000 laws on the books, gun laws. I believe the number is somewhere like 33,000 and change. And yet we still see these criminals get guns and go ahead and commit crimes with these guns. And the thing is, the enforcement of these gun laws happens after the crime has been committed, after the tragedy occurs. I have this discussion a lot with people. Whenever a tragedy happens, and we all can agree that these tragedies happen with guns, I always ask the people who are saying we need more gun laws, what law would have prevented X tragedy? And then they go down, well, you need a permit. Well, this person got it illegal. They didn't get it through legal channels, so what good was the permit? Magazine capacity. So-called assault weapon bans. They still got standard capacity mags. They still got their hands on a AR-15 or similar platform. They still had used a pistol that had a 15-round magazine. It's illegal, but they still got it. So what law Which law would have prevented? What additional law would have prevented it? They never have an answer. Now, when policies like this fail and these tragedies occur, a reasonable person would think, well, maybe we need to change our approach. Maybe advocating for additional gun laws won't work, as has been proven. Maybe we need to come up with something else. But yet they double and triple and quadruple down on stupid. Every single time, without fail. Sometimes even before the crime scene has been cleared. You have these dim-witted politicians going on camera talking about how we need more laws, more restrictions, more control. But they never address what I said earlier, that these new laws just don't prevent these crimes from happening. And just as an aside, I have given some proposals that I think would prevent a lot of these crimes. One of which, the most basic, stop letting criminals out of jail. Lock them up. People who commit these crimes often have dozens of felony arrests, and yet they're still walking the streets. Lock them up. And I've talked about before, first time offense with a firearm, mandatory 5 years. Second time offense with a firearm, mandatory 10 years. Third time, life. You do that enough times, and these criminals they'll think twice. Lock them up. Mayor Brandon Johnson said, you can't incarcerate yourselves. Yes, you can. Nayib Bukele and El Salvador did exactly that. And El Salvador is now, I believe, the safest country in the Western Hemisphere, or at least in the top 3. Because why? He incarcerated his country out of a crime problem. Look at the states that have these ridiculous bail reform laws, and look at the states that actually lock up criminals. Thomas Sowell, I know I quoted him once before, but I'm going to do it again. He said, some things are believed because they are demonstrably true, but many other things are believed simply because they have been asserted repeatedly and repetition has been accepted as a substitute for evidence. That is the left's gun control narrative in a nutshell. Despite all evidence to the contrary, they still keep doubling and tripling down on more gun control, when all evidence to the contrary shows us that it just does not work. Policy has become ideological rather than practical. Evidence is no longer a factor in decisions, and narratives, as a result of that, become self-sustaining. So a pattern is emerging. Wealth is leaving hostile states, governments overriding the will of the voters, policies collapsing under real world evidence. Each one of those shows that authority is insisting that it is correct, even when the cold, hard reality and the facts on the ground completely disagree. Because evidence means nothing to these people. Bad policy does not die. They won't let it die when it fails. The bad policy's life support is the narrative. But we're not just talking about crime policy. It goes to something much deeper. And at the end of the day, the real root cause is the fact that we have just abandoned God. That's the real root cause. But it goes to something. I mean, like I said, that's the root cause, but there is something else as a result of that. And every government, for good or ill, rests on the control of force. And that's why regimes around the world throughout history fear, above all else, an armed population. Free societies distribute power among citizens, but authoritarian regimes concentrate it. And we just talked about the gun policy narratives collapsing under the weight of reality. But the gun debate isn't just about crime statistics. It's about something a whole lot deeper. And as I said, government relies on control of force. And that has been plainly evident in what we're seeing going on, or what we saw go on in Iran. And Israeli leadership, not just Benjamin Netanyahu, there have been others, but Benjamin Netanyahu's statement. Here we go. Benjamin Netanyahu told the Iranian people to seize the moment. And he issued a statement, a direct message to the people of Iran. He said, "We are waging a historic war on liberty. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you to remove the Ayatollah regime and gain your freedom." He said later on, "We are focused on regime targets and are doing our best not to harm the people of Iran. We are your ally, your best ally. We fully respect your sovereignty, culture, and heritage. You asked for help, and help has arrived." So the Iranian people have a unique opportunity. He aimed that message at the citizens, and because he knows that regimes like the Ayatollahs, they fear, they just can't have, their people gaining power. They can't have that. They can't have the means of their ability to gain power. They can't have that available to them. Iran has tightly regulated civilian weapons. It's completely illegal. They maintain control through centralized force. And so armed resistance has become extremely difficult. And we saw that despite the fact that they don't have access to a lot of weaponry, they rose up anyway. And that's why I know the left will dispute the number 30,000, but that has been the accepted reported figure, that over 30,000 Iranian citizens were killed by the regime. Because they didn't have access to a lot of weapons. Or do they? We'll get back to that. But authoritarian regimes always disarm their populations. And I've written about this a number of times. You can just go back through history. Turkey, the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, obviously, Maoist China, Uganda, and the list goes on. And even modern dictatorships. Disarmed citizens become subjects rather than participants in government. And the American system that we enjoy, despite the left's attempts to take that away, and the fact that they want to disarm citizens, that should tell you where their heads are at. But the founders, they built this system and distributed power, local, state, federal. And they also gave us the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was not about hunting. Brybin once said, if you need 30 rounds to hunt a deer, you're a terrible shot, or something along those lines. It's not about hunting. Never has been. It is about having the means to resist and overthrow a tyrannical government. Legitimate governments have at least some amount of trust from the people that they're governing. Illegitimate regimes like Iran, they maintain authority through force. And governments that fear their citizens, the more they fear them, the more they try to disarm them. There was a meme I've seen over the years, something along the lines of, the government wants to disarm you because they're afraid they might do something you want to shoot them for. That one was from years ago, but there's another one that I actually saw either yesterday or today. With guns in the hands of the public, there may be tragedies, but without them, there will be genocides. History bears this out. You don't have to go looking very far. I mentioned some of those examples: Turkey, Germany, Uganda. Soviet Union. But yet they still insist on trying to take our gun rights away. So what does this mean? We've talked about wealth leaving. We talked about states challenging their elected officials, policy narratives being pushed despite evidence that they don't work. It all points to the same conclusion. Authority demands power, but their legitimacy has completely eroded. Every authoritarian system, every authoritarian regime begins the same way. Disarming the people. When institutions lose the confidence of the people, they increasingly try to control the people instead of trying to reestablish their legitimacy. And history shows that when something happens and that vacuum appears, another ideology is going to move in. And what ideology do you think that might be? There is an increasing presence of Islamic political activism in Western culture. Ideological movements pushing for influence in, and by ideological movements, I'm talking about Islamic extreme ideology, trying to gain influence in education, culture, politics. And the debate over Sharia influence is happening all across Western political discussion. And the supporters of Islam, the people who just simply don't want to be labeled as Islamophobic, they are saying that there's no possible way Sharia can gain a foothold. They're saying that this is fear-mongering. But they're just reluctant, for whatever reason, to confront this extremism. Again, despite all evidence that shows that it is a violent death cult. But for some reason, any discussion about it gets shut down. You're an Islamophobe. You're a racist. That's the best one. You're a racist because you don't want Sharia law imposed on your country, even though Islam is not a race, but details, I guess. When institutions refuse to defend their own their own principles, whether that institution is a country, whether it's a city, whatever institution it might be, a college, a business. When they refuse to defend their principles, that creates a space for other ideologies to advance. And that will lead to a collapse or a complete takeover. And history has shown this pattern over and over and over again. And I'm just looking at some of the some of the great stuff in the chat. It's awesome. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Stable societies believe in and defend their founding principles: freedom, rule of law, individual rights. All of that is completely out the window when it comes to Sharia law. And Sharia law is simply the means by which Muslims practice their religion. Every Muslim is an adherent, to varying degrees, admittedly, to Sharia law. The two are inextricably linked. And so when people say banning Sharia law is effectively a ban on Islam, well, that's not true, because you can practice your religion without imposing it on other people. And people will say, well, you think this is a Christian nation and you want everyone to be a Christian? Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. But I am not going to go around beheading people who refuse. I'm not going around saying Christianity will be in every home. I pray for that to happen, absolutely. But the difference is they are going to use force to do it. Or they are willing to use force. If we don't put a stop to it, it will eventually become the dominant culture. All we got to do is look at Europe. All we got to do is look at the UK. Can't let it happen here. So what is the pattern? We've talked about a lot of things, a lot of seemingly different stories, but the pattern, there's a pattern emerging. You have wealth leaving states, governments, and I've talked about this already, governments challenging elected officials, policy narratives that ignore reality, regimes fearing armed citizens. All of those point to, as I said, institutions that have completely lost their willingness to defend their founding principles. Civilizations don't collapse overnight. The decline usually begins when when they refuse to adhere to the principles that they were founded on. Leadership stops defending its values. And we can talk about how and when and why this started. That's a whole series of episodes if you really want to get into it. But systems drift without any clear direction. And if there is no clear direction, something is going to stand in the gap and take control. When I made this point earlier, when civilizations stop defending what made them flourish in the first place, something else will gladly, enthusiastically take its place. All right, there's a couple of things I wanted to get to. I actually got through that a little quicker than I expected, honestly. But that means that I have an opportunity to talk about a couple of other things before we get you out of here. And I know I have it somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So we talked about before CNN, Abby Phillip. Well, actually, I haven't mentioned Abby Phillip in a while, I don't think, but we talked about CNN and other American Pravda outlets that reported on the story of the attack on Islamic protesters in front of Mamdani's home. And that, do I have that story? I actually don't think I have the CNN story pulled up. But Abby Phillip on her show, on her terrible show that people only watch because Scott Jennings is off and on, well, you know, let's just take a look at this. This will give you what we need to know.
This morning, I issued a correction first thing in the morning on X for a mistake that I made in last night's show, but I also wanted to do so on air as well. I incorrectly said that the bomb.
Well, no, you didn't want to do so on air. You thought that your little X post correction would be enough. And then you got all kinds of backlash. And I don't know if this is going to be enough to put her job in jeopardy just yet, but the evidence is building. I mean, the only difference between her and Joy Reid is that she's not as terrible to look at as Joy Reid is. That's it. They are both stupid and they are both insufferable. But let's continue.
Bombs that were thrown by ISIS-inspired suspects in New York over the weekend were directed at Mayor Mamdani. They were not. I failed to catch and correct that mistake in real time, and I take full responsibility for that.
You didn't fail to catch it. It wasn't meant to be caught. Your network already basically said the same thing. Yeah, they took down that post, but this is what they believe. And it wasn't just you. You let Ana Navarro say the same thing.
And while we do make mistakes, it is important to acknowledge and correct those errors when they happen. This morning.
But you didn't correct it when it happened. You corrected it the next morning on X, and then 24 hours later at the beginning of your show. You didn't do a Facebook Live. You didn't do a video. Nothing like that. You thought you could issue some weak Twitter post acknowledging it and thought that would do it. CNN, I don't know what's going on with them. I mean, Scott Jennings deserves her spot, or somebody else. Leave Scott Jennings as a panelist. And Abby Phillips is nothing but a propagandist. That is what she is. She is a left-wing propagandist. She constantly interrupts Scott Jennings and Sir Michael Singleton and Kevin O'Leary and some of the other conservatives that they allow on the show. But when it comes, like I said, she let Anna Navarro get away with telling a complete lie. And they let these other left-wing lunatics just prattle on about all kinds of nonsense. But then as soon as they get fact-checked by a conservative, then all of a sudden they got to go to break. Then all of a sudden they're getting off topic. It's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous. And I don't know how much longer she's really got. I mean, I know it may take a little longer, but rest assured, something like this is going to happen again. They didn't learn their lesson. They didn't learn their lesson. Oh, I do have it. So prior to that, CNN had this post where they said, 2 Pennsylvania teenagers crossed into New York Saturday morning for what could have been a normal day, enjoying the city during abnormally warm weather. But in less than an hour, their lives would drastically change as the pair would be arrested for throwing homemade bombs during an anti-Muslim protest outside of Zohran Mamdani's home. That is not what happened. They deleted that post eventually. So what Abby Phillips said during her show was not a mistake. That was policy. That was policy. And the only reason that she issued that retraction on air was because the backlash was so strong. That's it. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I don't watch CNN much. I will watch occasionally when Scott Jennings is on and something interesting happens, and I'll go back and watch that show on demand. But only time people watch CNN is when they're trapped in an airport. And Abby Phillips show, the last time I looked at the ratings, she was like number 48 in that time slot. I think she was even below where Joy Reid was ranking when Joy Reid got fired. if not below, right around that same area. These propagandists, man. I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, all right, let's go ahead and get you out of here. We looked at today, aside from the American Pravda propagandists, we looked at businesses fleeing hostile environments, governments basically urinating all over what the voters want, policies collapsing under even the slightest bit of scrutiny and real world evidence. Different stories, same pattern. The legitimacy that once supported their power is cracking. And history tells us exactly what happened next. Systems don't collapse all at once. Usually, they crack first. And our system is cracking. And the only thing that is really going to seal those cracks is, first of all, Christians stepping up and praying. And then Americans stepping up and standing in the gap and demanding a change to seal those cracks. But anyway, folks, that's all I got for you for this briefing. We are not just here to try and prattle on for 90 minutes. We're here to equip Christian men, spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, and carry the banner of faith, freedom, and hope into the next generation. And if anything that we said here today matters to you, please don't just watch, but share it. Share it with another guy, bring another man into the fight. And if you want to wear what you stand for, head over to missionreadymen.com, click Shop 7 Armors, and check out all the great designs we have there about bold faith, true grit, and unapologetic patriotism. And also head over to shrmedia.com, and right at the top of the page, you'll see the SHR Media Shop. Go ahead and check that out, and check out the designs of all of the logos for all of the logo T-shirts for all of the shows we have. The Conservative Sherpa, BZ, the Reaver of Common Sense, the Edge of Liberty, and Beer and Bullstein. That is a great logo. You really want to check that out, and check out all of the other things that we have over there on the SHR Media Shop. And remember, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away, but the Lord is right there with you. So keep your prayers going up and your head on a swivel. God bless.